For those of us who are joining us online, we are just about to get started. I didn't want to make everyone online as well wait too much longer. So can you hear me all right? Yes? Okay. All right, we are ready to get started. Thank you so much for coming to the Downtown Library tonight. My name is Misha Stone, she, her, and I'm a Reader Services librarian here at the Central Library. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the Seattle Public Library is on Indigenous land. These are the traditional, unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. Thank you for joining us tonight for this event with Clarion West Speculative Summer Reading Series. The library is proud to be hosting 4 of these events this summer. And we just really support the work that Clarion West is doing in our local and global writing communities. Thank you so much. And we are just so thrilled to have Fonda Lee here tonight, week 3 of Clarion West. And I also just want to congratulate Fonda on winning the Locus Award recently for Jade Legacy. So a round of applause. We are also pleased tonight to be offering ASL interpretation for the online audience. You can join us at the YouTube stream for that. Additionally, there is CART interpretation. We have a nice little QR code. If you need CART captioning services, you can put that QR code in and you'll be able to see the live captioning of this event. So I want to thank my colleagues for making our events more accessible. This event is supported by the Seattle Public Library Foundation, author series sponsor Gary Kunis, and media sponsor the Seattle Times, and presented in partnership with our good friends, University Bookstore. Thank you, Dwayne and Elizabeth, for being here tonight. I want to mention that the library has started hosting hybrid events in person and online. We are still encouraging people to register just so we know who's coming in person and online so that we can really gauge that over time. Events of note coming up, Daniel James Brown will be in conversation with Tom Ikeda and Michael Shiosaki discussing Facing the Mountain on Saturday, July 23rd at 1 o'clock. The next 2 Clarion West events are going to be at Town Hall at 7:30, and I know my Clarion West friends will be telling us more about that. And then the final Clarion West culminating reading is going to be here Tuesday, July 26th at 7 o'clock with Charlie Jane Anders and Annalie Newitz. I was very excited about that. So thanks again for joining us. And now I'm going to hand it to my Clarion West board alum and colleague, Todd McCoy.
Hello, everybody. They hear me okay? Excellent. How y'all doing tonight? Good. Nice to see you all. The paper. I don't know what to say. Well, my name is. Oh, I wanted mine, but yeah, okay. That's okay. You know what I did? I prepared. Well, my name is Todd McCoy, he, him. I am the board chair of the Clarion West Writers Workshop. And I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight for the 2022 Summer Reading Series. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight, both online and in person. Our mission is to support emerging and sorry, I just spent 3 hours on the road from Portland. Our mission is to support emerging and underrepresented voices by providing writers with world-class instruction to empower the creation of wild and amazing worlds. Through conversation and public engagement, we bring these voices to an ever-expanding community. The chance to showcase the work of amazing instructors like Fonda Lee is a big part of that opportunity. Thank you to the Seattle Public Library and the University Bookstore for partnering on tonight's event. I also want to let you know that this series and our other classes and workshops would not be possible without the generous support of Seattle Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, King County for Culture, the National Endowment for the Arts, and many individual donors. Thank you so much. The reading series continues through July 26th. All of the readings are on Tuesdays, and we're asking folks to register online at clarionwest.org before you go. Please note that the readings on July 12th and 19th will be held at Town Hall, Seattle, which isn't too far from here, at 7:30, not the 7 o'clock time, it's 7:30. Due to construction around that neighborhood, please plan in advance for parking. In addition to our reading series and summer workshop, the Clarion West Write-a-thon is officially underway. Anybody here doing the write-a-thon? Yeah, it's pretty fun. The write-a-thon has turned into an international community event, and it's our longest running fundraiser. Think of a walk-a-thon with words. Writers from all over the world sign up and set writing goals, and then recruit sponsors to show their support by making a donation to Clarion West. That sponsorship is really important, not just to Clarion West, but to the individual writers. I mean, it means a lot if you donate even like $5 or $10 to a single writer. During the write-a-thon, writers stretch and accomplish so much, hundreds of thousands of words of new work that might not otherwise exist. We are now up to over 526 writers participating in the write-a-thon this summer, and we are at least 42% funded toward our goal. I encourage all of you to consider sponsoring one or more of those writers, and it's really easy. Just visit the Clarion West website to get details about it. Whether you're joining us in person or online tonight, we will have time for Q&A at the end of the reading. We will pass out index cards and pencils for in-person questions, and we will read questions from the YouTube chat to answer as well. Thank you again for your support. Now I'm going to invite workshop facilitator Maria. Are you next? Sorry, Amy, my fault. I didn't change that. Amy will tell you more about Fonda Lee. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Amy Hirayama. I am the Clarion West workshop workshop administrator. And it's my pleasure to introduce Fonda this evening. At our first class meeting with Fonda, she introduced us to her trinity of storytelling: character, world building, and pacing. So let's start with character. Our character, Fonda Lee, is the author of the Hugo-nominated and award-winning series, The Greenbone Saga, whose final installment, as we just heard, Jade Legacy, won the Locus Award last week. Her work has been honored with the World Fantasy Award, 3 Aurora Awards, multiple Nebula nominations, and was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award. In describing her novel, Jade City, Fonda said she wrote it because it was what I wanted to read but couldn't find on shelves. Perhaps we can attribute that dauntless resolve to her background as a corporate strategist with an MBA from Stanford. But I've learned from sitting in on Fonda's workshops this week that that's oversimplified character development. Let's move on to world building. The world Fonda builds in the classroom is one where students get an artisan's perspective on how stories come to be. The precision and thrill of her fight scenes come from her deep understanding of how stories work. With that same precision and thrill, Fonda can pinpoint what makes a story tick in a particular way and how specific revisions yield different results. The word workshop feels more literal this week, like we're apprentices to an expert wordsmith who has a workbench full of tools that she wields with enviable skill. As for pacing, I've drawn out this introduction far too long, and it is definitely time for the real action. So will you please join me in welcoming Fonda Lee?
Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you to Amy for that generous introduction, and to Clarion West for having me teach week 3. Amazing class. Shout out to all the students out in the audience up there. Woohoo! You guys are rocking it, I have to say. It's been a pleasure teaching you so far, and thank you to Misha and the Seattle Public Library for hosting me. So I had a bit of a difficult time deciding what to read tonight, because my most recent novel is a trilogy ending 255,000 word doorstopper, and everything that I would read from that would be spoiler and would take a bunch of time to even set up the context for. So I thought I would read a couple of short bits tonight. So I am going to read a little bit from a short story in the Greenbone Saga that is not published yet, but will be part of a collection of shorts that Subterranean Press will put out next year. So If you are a Greenbone Saga reader and you've already read the whole trilogy, then this is a little something for you to take away tonight. And then I'm going to read a short story in its entirety that was recently published in Uncanny Magazine. So if you just wandered in from the library and have no idea who I am, you still get a full meal coming out. All right, so I'm going to read the little short from the Greenbone Saga first. If you're not familiar with the Greenbone Saga world, it is an epic urban fantasy series that takes place on a fictional island called Kakon, which is the only source of the world's magical jade. And it is ruled by two clans that are composed of warriors called Greenbones, who control the mining, production, and distribution of this jade. And there are these other world powers that are angling for a piece of this jade trade, one of the countries being Igutan, and another called Aspenia. And the main storyline follows the Kull family. They are the leaders of one of these clans. And the reason why the jade is so coveted is because wearing it is not just a sign of status, it gives you actual superhuman abilities, much like what you would see in your favorite wuxia kung fu films, running up walls and sending out chi blasts and deflecting bullets in midair, etc. So this is a little piece from one of the, is actually a prequel story that takes place before the events of the series, so there are no spoilers. And the story is called Granddaughter Cormorant. The Igutanian was standing by the bar in a charcoal gray suit, chatting with another conference attendee. Shay caught only a glimpse of his face in profile, and she couldn't read his name tag from this angle, but the man's yellow beard was recognizable from the photos she'd seen and easy to pick out even in a room with many other foreigners. She made her way casually toward him, as if she was wandering the lobby of the Crown Summit Hotel in the aimless, exploratory manner of a first-time trade show attendee, weaving around clusters of socializing businessmen and stopping by one of the vendor tables where a woman cheerfully handed her a pocket flashlight and a set of coasters emblazoned with corporate logos. As she approached the faux wood bar, Shay wound her green silk scarf around her neck, discreetly concealing her jade necklace. She had learned that men, especially older men, reacted to the sight of a 22-year-old woman wearing as much jade as a senior finger in about the same way she imagined they might react to her openly carrying a machine gun, with nervous surprise, unseemly flirtatious interest, and undisguised concern that she might carelessly injure herself or others with such a dangerous weapon, one not made for delicate hands. She didn't know how knowledgeable this foreigner was about Greenbones and jade, but given her mission, she didn't want to put him on edge or arouse his suspicion. She was trying to think of how to unobtrusively insert herself into the company of the men at the bar when one of the Kekanese attendees glanced down past her neckline to her name tag. "Call Shaylinson," he exclaimed, stepping back and touching his forehead in delighted greeting. "It's a surprise, an honor to meet the Pillar's granddaughter. Is Call Jen here?" He glanced around the bar eagerly, hoping to see the clan patriarch nearby. "No," Shay answered, amused by the idea that Cull Sennington wouldn't have better things to do on a fifth-day evening than chit-chat with tractor salesmen. Perhaps 20 years ago that might have been the case, but that had been before Shay's time. The No-Peak clan was not so new anymore, and though it was still growing rapidly, reaching out hungrily wherever its influence could extend, the Pillar did not need to be everywhere himself. "He's unable to attend, but the weatherman and I are here." "Oh, well, that's understandable. I'll have to go find Yundoropon and pay my respects," said the disappointed businessman. He turned his friendly attention back to Shay. He was quite attractive, in his late 20s, she guessed, with a clean-shaven jawline made stronger by the sharpness of his navy blue suit. But he was nothing special, not compared to Gerald in a crisp Aspenian military uniform. "May I be the first to buy you a drink, Miss Call?" the businessman asked solicitously, motioning her toward the bar and smiling broadly. "I had no idea you were interested in Kakon's agricultural industry." Shay had minimal of any interest in the Agri-Kakon conference, but she smiled back, ignoring the fact that he'd neglected to address her properly. She knew by now that no one thought of her as called Jen, not when she had a famous grandfather and two older brothers. "It's my goal to learn as much as I can about every area where the No-Peak clan has interests, Mr. Honto," she said, reading off his name tag before looking him in the eyes. Of course, Mr. Honto said agreeably. I think it's very admirable that women are making such great strides in the business world. Mountain Clan has even appointed a woman as weatherman, so surely women can do anything now. What will you have to drink? Nothing for me. I've already had a drink, Shay lied, brushing aside the offer. She didn't want to encourage the man's attention in any way, even if it was innocuous. Her marriage prospects were a subject of speculation in the clan. What fortunate man would the torch of Kakon accept as a husband to his beloved granddaughter and his son-in-law to the ruling family of No Peak? Shay grimaced inwardly every time she thought about it. She softened her rejection of Honto by glancing around at the gathering and saying, "This is my first time at the conference and I don't know anyone here. Would you be so kind as to introduce me to people? Who is that tall foreigner with the beard?" Honto introduced her to Helvan Ea Rostov. The Egutanian shook Shay's hand firmly, but without much warmth, his gaze settling on her with far less interest than Honto's. "What do you do in the agriculture industry, Mr. Rostov?" she asked. "I sell fertilizer," he said in halting Kekanese. "Igutan make best fertilizer." Shay accepted his business card. "Is this your first time in Janloon?" "This my first time for business," he said, raising his voice above the growing din of conversation at the bar. "Very nice city." Rostov was broad as well as tall, his shoulders amply filling out his suit. His eyes were a startlingly bright blue, a touch unnerving to look upon. "I hope you'll have a chance to see more of Janloon beyond this hotel," Shay said. "How long will you be staying?" She kept her voice mild and friendly as she focused her perception, trying to blot out all the other distracting energies in the room. People without jade aura stood out less distinctively in her mind's eye, but she concentrated on noticing and remembering Rostov's energy, pale and opaque, emanating like a faint static hum. "Not long, only 5 days," Rostov admitted. She could sense his reticence and thought perhaps she could draw him into conversation another way. "I'm sad to say I haven't been to Igutan, although I would like to," she admitted regretfully. "What part of the country do you come from? Is it nice there?" She managed to get a little more talk out of him. He came from Dramsk. He spoke Shotarian in addition to Kekanese, which he'd learned because his company wished to grow its business in the East Americ region. He was unmarried and childless. Nevertheless, she could tell Rostov was impatient and wanted to move on, perhaps to talk to colleagues and potential buyers who would be more professionally useful to him. As he spoke to her, he glanced down at his watch and his eyes drifted from side to side. "Ah, there you are, Shay, sir." From behind her, Yun Doru's smoky jade aura impinged on Shay's perception before his reedy voice reached her. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Shay grimaced, then forced her face into pleasantness before turning around to face the clan's weatherman. "Yes, Uncle Doru, I'm learning a lot just from the conversations I'm having." She turned back toward Rostov only to find that in her moment of inattention, the Egutanian had slipped away back into the crowd. She caught a glimpse of Rostov's back moving away from her through the hotel lobby. She cursed Doru silently. "Pleased to hear that," Doru said, interlacing his long fingers. "Industries such as agriculture and transportation may not be very glamorous, but they provide the clan much valuable tributary business. We have experts on each sector in the Ship Street office, but it's important for a good weatherman to know all the fundamentals." Doru never failed to take the opportunity to expound to her on the responsibilities and methods of a good weatherman, doling out advice with the patient wisdom of a mentor to a protege. "Glad I came, Uncle Doru, but I'm getting tired." Shay sagged slightly to make her point. From the corner of her eye, she could see Rostov waiting for the elevator behind a large group of people. "I'm going to walk the exhibit floor for a few minutes, then go home." Doru nodded, his thin head in understanding. "Shall we leave in half an hour?" "I'll take a taxi. There's no need for you to cut your business here short," Shay assured him. "I know there are plenty of lantern men you still need to talk to." "Mr. Honto," she called out to the businessman and motioned him over insistently, making sure that Doru was occupied expecting Honto's respectful wishes and enmeshed in conversation before she extricated herself and hurried as quickly as unsuspicious decorum allowed toward Rostov. She was lucky because the Crown Summit's small old elevator was jammed with conference attendees. Rostov, left behind in the lobby as the door closed on a full load of passengers, gave up on his weight and strode around the corner to the stairwell. Shay caught the stairwell door before it closed and slipped inside after him. Rostov was already past the second floor landing and heading to the third. She followed more slowly, keeping her perception trained on the foreigner above and stepping lightly on the balls of her feet so the heels of her black pumps wouldn't clack on the concrete stairs. So I will stop there, and to find out what happens in the rest of her pursuit of the foreigner, you will have to wait until the book comes out next year. And I'm going to read a short from Uncanny Magazine. It's called The Eternal Cocktail Party of the Damned, in a very, very different tone. There is a content note that there's casual violence, profanity, and threat of sexual assault. Oh, let me show you the pictures. Bezoth the demon scrolls through his cell phone and holds it out with pride, raising his voice over the noise of the party. She was the runt of the litter, just 2 heads, but she's the sweetest floof. Aw, Aphos croons appreciatively. No pets for me, but here's a picture of an amazing sandwich I made using some leftover crispy skin from the hot oil pits. Bezoth waves a dozen people through the entrance. Freshly damned souls by the look of them, still cowering and blinking in confusion, stumbling a little. Unlike an ordinary bouncer, Bezoth's job is to bring in as many partygoers as possible. So far, that has not been a problem. Steady streams of the condemned flow past him, and whenever it seems to be getting crowded inside, the venue expands. Another floor of the club opens, another balcony appears. Doors materialize in walls and lead to captivating new rooms. Every once in a while, someone balks and tries to turn away before they enter, or some of the humans inside make a valiant attempt to escape the party. And then Bezoth has to step in with a touch of mind control to keep them there. You still work over in the burning and boiling circle? He asks Aphos. Only part-time, she says with a shrug, stirring her drink. It's pretty dead in there. No pun. Not like over here. This place is where it's happening. It's true. The newest circle of hell is a sensation. The damned have been flocking to it in droves, eschewing old standbys like fire and brimstone, the skinning racks, the scorpion tanks. Contrary to what the living believe, the residents of hell always have a choice as to where they spend their eternity of torture. An important principle of perdition is that suffering is always worse when it's the result of one's own decisions. Many damned souls choose the relatively new, soul-sucking, dead-end minimum wage job circle, thinking that it'll be pretty much identical to their lives on Earth, only to regret it deeply once they learn what an actual soul-sucking process entails. Dress code is a lot more relaxed over at hot oil pits, though, Bezoth points out. Here, he's expected to maintain a human guise. One of the features of the party is that the hosts blend into the crowd just like everyone else. At the moment, Bezoth has donned the identity of a Wall Street banker. Aphos is poised as a Bitcoin farmer. Sure, Aphos concedes, but this job is so much easier. Compared to all the physical labor, heating the oil, wrangling the chains, lowering the thrashing humans, pulling them out again, this is a cakewalk. We barely have to do anything except keep the vibe going, and the humans do all the work for us. I'm really hoping to get a permanent transfer. She sets down her empty drink glass and surveys the activity. Speaking of which, we'd better do the rounds. Starting to feel a bit calm in here. Bezoth hadn't really noticed any lull. The party's always shifting and changing. One door might take a wandering soul into a packed and pulsing dance club. At other times, that same door leads to a rooftop garden brunch. The party continues nonstop at all hours, not that there's such a thing as real time in hell. At this moment, they're in a sprawling penthouse banquet room with classy black cocktail tables and clusters of comfortable red furniture around which the guests mingle and converse. The longest buffet table anyone has ever seen is laden with every sort of food, and servers in waistcoats bustle efficiently to deliver drinks and offer canapes on silver trays. Red wine flows from the mouth of a serpentine crystal fountain, and glass wall scones burn with bright white light that masks the opaque, sickly green glow of the underworld fog that swirls in the oblivion on the other side of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The partygoers, it seems, are having a grand time. Laughter and boisterous chatter fill the air. Guests pose to show off their outfits, which change immediately with a mere wish. The physical rules of the living don't apply here, after all. Old friends greet each other, and new acquaintances strike up conversations. Only a closer look at the faces of the humans reveals the terror lurking in their eyes, the twitchy animal fear behind their smiles. Many of them move and talk with unnatural deliberation, their glances darting from side to side, often freezing or flinching like electrified mice. On the stage, the 5-piece band finishes a set. Some guests applaud, others shout praise and throw money onto the stage. Then someone yells, "Your drummer sucks!" A pistol is fired at the offending band member from near the front of the audience. The keyboard player tries to pull the drummer to safety while drawing a semi-automatic from his waistband to return fire. Another guest mows the keyboard player down with a short burst of machine gun fire. The remaining band members flee. The grenade that explodes on the stage behind them turns the vocalist and both shooters into sauce. "Oh, thank Lucifer. That's more like it. Aphos says over the screaming. "Shall we mingle?" Bezoth jerks his thumb toward a group of guests in Confederate flag bandanas. "Head that way and see what we pick up along the way." As the demons move unhurriedly through the crowd, dozens of giant screens suspended from the ceiling flicker in a rapid-fire onslaught of sound and images. Everything that's happening in every corner of the boundless and constant underworld party is being recorded and replayed, far too fast for humans to keep up with, which is why infernal caretakers manipulate the screens, keeping the party mood going like DJs spinning dance tracks. Bezoth passes a man telling a story about losing an epic eating contest. Immediately, the images of carnage from the band stage are gone, replaced by the storyteller's face, rendered gigantic, every mole and hair follicle visible in high definition as his hilarious tale booms from the speakers. Everyone laughs and applauds. The man flushes and waves. "Thank you, everyone." Then he blurts desperately, "Please help me, someone!" But Bezoth moves on and the sound cuts out. Bezoth, Aphos, a young woman with blue hair and pigtails, glides into their path before they can turn their attention to anyone else. "Fancy running into you again so soon. Not that any of us can leave, so no surprise." She giggles a touch maniacally, then her voice turns sultry and coy as she shimmers between the two demons. "By the way, did you know I was voted to Hell's Most Fashionable list a second time?" She's wearing a corset made of human skin, an ivory tiara made of rhino horn, and thigh-high boots that are literally on fire. Flames scorch the floor where she walks. She turns in a circle, well aware that her image is now flashing on all the screens. "Ainsley," Aphos says congenially, "forget it." Of all the countless damned souls present, only a few guests have been granted VIP status by the hosts. They're haloed in a cold blue glow that sets them apart. Hell's eyes focus on them and ignore others. They supposedly get better service from the waiters as well as other perks, although no one is entirely sure what those perks are. Ainsley Chu is not a VIP, although she wants to be. Her large posse of hanger-ons come up behind her and hiss and make angry faces at Aphos. Ainsley wraps an arm around the waists of the two nubile young women on either side of her and turns to Bezoth with a pout. "Come on, what's a girl got to do for some recognition?" "Yo, Ainsley, we're gonna gang rape you later," cheer the neo-Nazis. Ainsley's face twitches spasmodically and her smile wavers for an instant before she looks over her shoulder and waves to the crowd casually. She turns back to Bezoth. "Just tell me," she begs in a whisper, "why won't you make me a VIP?" Bezoth shrugs. "You're not important enough." The woman flinches and the demon grins. When she was alive, Ainsley Chu was a media influencer and aspiring actress. That was before she lost her battle with depression and committed suicide. It never ceases to amaze Bezoth how easy it is to torment humans simply by allowing them to act in hell as they would in life. To make his point, Bezoth points to Eating Contest Man, who has retreated to a corner. Instantly, a blue glow surrounds him from head to toe. The party cameras zoom in on the man's stunned face as he stares down at his hands and realizes what's happened. "Welcome to our new VIP," boom the speakers, before Rick Astley music starts blasting over the crowd. Angry shouts start up over the rickrolling. "Oh, come on. What did that asshole ever do to deserve VIP status? He lost the eating contest, but gets rewarded for being a fucking loser? It wasn't even a funny story. He's just desperate for attention. Well, it worked, didn't it? Most wannabe comedian thinks he's better than us." Eating Contest Man lets out a terrified squeak and flees, pursued by a pack of people throwing steak knives. Several of them sink into his back as he runs through a door, disappearing for less than a second before he bursts through an identical door on the other side of the exact same room. Bezoth shakes his head, and Aphos rolls her eyes. Silly humans. They ought to know by now that escaping hell isn't simple. Eating contest man dives behind the bar and barricades himself into a corner with bar stools. Still want to be a VIP? Aphos asks Ainsley Chu. Ainsley huffs. That guy was obviously asking for it, showing his ass with that ridiculous story. I mean, such a bad look. Why would you tell on yourself like that? And then to take a condescending attitude with his own fans. She scowls prettily at the two demons. Even if you make anyone into a VIP these days, some people just aren't cut out for it. Take it from a professional. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Ainsley Chu's followers nod and gaze at her admiring. We know you'd never let us down, Ainsley. One of them declares, you're one of the best people in hell. Thank you, my dear friends, Ainsley says solemnly. VIP status is meaningless anyway. I'm here to genuinely connect with people. I don't care about anyone else's recognition, so long as I know you're all with me. They share a group hug. Let's go back to the buffet and get some sushi, someone suggests. Ainsley glances over at the buffet table where pink lobes of beautifully arranged mystery flesh pulsate gently on a long bamboo platter. Several pieces of sashimi undulate feebly toward escape off the edge of the table. They are delicately captured with chopsticks and returned to their rightful places by the watchful sushi chef. Ew, honestly, I never really liked sushi even when the fish were dead instead of me. Ainsley laughs and starts to walk away. How about the salad bar instead? She stops in mid-stride as her own voice booms over the party. Ew, ew, ew. Ainsley looks up to see her own enormous image say, I never really liked sushi. Ew, sushi. How about the salad bar instead? Sushi. Ew. The replay flickers over and over again, the spliced repetition of the words strung into cacophonous poetry. Ainsley spins to face her devoted followers. One of them volunteers, I don't love sushi either. And another nods in agreement, but others stand and stare at their idol with expressions ranging from confusion to shock, disappointment, and anger. Ainsley, one of them exclaims, you hate sushi? No, she exclaims, panic beginning to swell in her voice. She takes a step back. It's not my favorite food, but I don't hate it. I was only looking at what was. Aphos lazily flicks a finger and the party's cameras instantly whiz over to a random guest on the other side of the banquet floor, sipping a fruity cocktail from behind the mask with black feathers and glitter. Ainsley Chu says she's disgusted by sushi. She hates it so much that she literally prefers salad. That is so racist. A tsunami of outraged shouts rises at once. Bezoth and Aphos exchange a high five and work quickly to capture and amplify as many of them as possible. I can't believe I voted her hell's most fashionable. Huge mistake. The absolute disrespect to my favorite food. I will never forgive her. Isn't she half Korean or Chinese? So awful to find out she's racist against Japanese people. But being Asian doesn't excuse you from being anti-Asian. There was always something off about her. This one time I met her, Ainsley's face is frozen in horror. She spins wildly, her fiery boots leaving a blackened circle on the ground with her in the center of the scorched area. I wasn't talking about sushi in general, she wails. I love Japanese culture. I watch anime. I've visited Japan and one of my best friends is Japanese and I do like California rolls and also tempura. She sobs and hides her face in her hands. Oh my God, California rolls aren't even Japanese, another guest chortles. She got called out and then doubled down on the racism. Voices drown out Ainsley's crying. Several of her followers flee the scene, but others meld into the encircling crowd and tell her with cold regret in their voices, you messed up, Ainsley. You ought to simply apologize for the harm you've done. The harm? Ainsley whimpers in miserable confusion. To the Japanese people. There are no Japanese people in the immediate area, so Aphos helpfully cycles through the camera views until the screens display some Yakuza members in the club lounge 2 floors below them. They look extremely serious and worried because whoever loses this game of cards they're playing will be sent to the hot oil pits for 300 subjective human years. But it's also conceivably possible they might be culturally offended by slander against sushi. You attacked Chef Yamamoto, another interlocutor intones, one of the girls that was last seen with Ainsley's arm around her waist. How do you think he feels? The sushi chef is an 8-foot-tall, unsmiling, blue-skinned Oni whose white horns poke through the top of his chef's hat. At the mention of his name, Yamamoto looks up briefly from behind his prep table before returning to skinning baby dolphins alive. Bezoth and Aphos head over to the bar to get themselves a celebratory drink. Their work is done, and Bezoth leans back to enjoy the show. He loves this part. Ainsley drops to her knees. I'm sorry, she moans. I didn't mean it. Low growls erupt into snarling, magnified throughout the room. That's it? You call that an apology? A plate smashes over Ainsley's head. No acknowledgement of what you've done and absolutely zero sense of how you're going to change in the future. Aren't you in hell to try to better yourself? A crab fork is jammed into Ainsley's eyeball, and she lets out a blood-curdling shriek. She staggers to her feet, tiara askew, blood streaming down her cheek as she tries to run. She doesn't make it far before she's pulled to the ground and hacked apart with machetes. The Nazis wander over, lamenting that they did not get to gang rape her, but agree that watching an orgy of her dismemberment is the next best thing. Gory bits and pieces of Ainsley Chew are scattered across half the penthouse banquet room. They land in the punch bowls and the chocolate fountain, are kicked under the armchairs and tables, and end up squashed underfoot or piled into corners by bored participants. All the blood vanishes into hell's highly absorbent red carpeting. Once the activity begins to die down, Bezoth sets his drink glass down, but Aphos motions considerately. I've got this. She brings the images on screen to guests hanging out in the karaoke bar 5 floors down. I'm so disappointed. One of them sighs. I was really rooting for Tinsley Cho. I knew she was on some sort of list. I can't remember which. Can't have been very important. Anyway, when I heard she was problematic, you can bet that I stopped supporting her right then and there. The faces of the 2 supporters who initially expressed less than enthusiastic opinions of sushi appear on screen next. They try to stammer out that they never even knew Ainsley, but they are chased down and beaten to death with tire irons. The camera pivots to Eating Contest Man, who had been surreptitiously crawling out from behind the bar, still holding one of the stools for protection. A pause of 1.5 seconds descends as the party waits to hear the opinion of its newest VIP. Eating Contest Man freezes like a wide-eyed rabbit, not making a single sound. We see you being silent, yells the guest in the ball gown and black mask, holding Ainsley's right elbow joint. Cowardly VIPs failing to condemn bad behavior. Eating Contest Man dives back behind the bar and curls up in fetal position. He doesn't seem about to do more than quiver helplessly for a while, so Aphos sets the cameras to automatically monitor the Star Wars fan gathering on the other side of the penthouse floor. The Last Jedi was a good movie, screams one man as he skewers another through the throat with a fireplace poker. He's unable to gloat over the other fan's body because an axe splits his skull down the middle, spilling his brains. That's for saying Rogue One is overrated, snarls the axe wielder. None of the dispatched guests are dead, of course, or rather, they are all already dead. So nothing that happens to them here is real in the physical sense. Ainsley Chew can be killed over and over again and still return. Already her head, neck, and one shoulder have glommed back together, although she looks quite grotesque. Stop, her dismembered top quarter of a body wheezes weakly. It hurts. Please stop. Oh, a man-sized frog steps around her and kicks away the ribs that were rolling their way toward the spine. What do you have to complain about, Miss Hell's Most Fashionable? I'm a fucking frog. Stop playing the victim already. As I was saying earlier, Aphos said, this is the easiest job I've had since I was spawned. Whoever came up with this new circle is a genius. Was it Asmodeus? No, it was that new guy. Bezoth corrects her. Jack. Genius, Aphos repeats. Bright future in hell for him. I truly can't believe I'm being paid to do this. Oh wait, never mind, I'm not. The 2 of them laugh. We do it for the pure love of the work, Bezoth says. They laugh harder and clink glasses. Oh, hey, I have to show you another picture. My hellhound puppy did the cutest thing the other day. You are gonna love this. He takes out his phone. Thank you.
We are going to get started with some Q&A. I'm going to hand the mic to Rashida. And those of you in the audience, we're going to hand out note cards if you haven't got them, so you write your questions down. And we're also going to be taking questions from the audience. And we were in stitches on the side. I just have to say, thank you so much for your reading, Fonda. I'm going to hand the mic to Rashida. Here we go.
Yeah, comedy, comedy, comedy. So while we're waiting for the cards to go around and gather us some questions from the intertubes, you taught recently a class on writing trilogies online, Clarion West, thank you. And a lot of folks got a lot out of that. Are there any tips for writing a trilogy, whether you know you're going in writing a trilogy or it becomes a trilogy as you start your first book, that you would share with the writers out there?
Run away now while you still can. No, I think the funny thing about writing a trilogy is when you're writing the first book, you're like, this is the hardest. If I can sell this, then I can do 2 more books, no problem. Then you get to writing the second book and you're like, no, this is definitely the hardest book because it's the middle book. It has to do the heavy lifting. It's the make it or break it book. And then you get to the third book and you're like, no, this is the hardest book because it has to stick the landing. And if it ends badly, no one is going to want to read the trilogy. So every book in the trilogy has its own unique challenges. And I think the thing to remember when you are writing a trilogy is that each book still has to have its own arc. I mean, you have an overall trilogy arc that spans the 3 books, but each book has to have its own momentum and to be its own thing. And so you're actually in the middle book, you're juggling multiple arcs because you have threads that you have from your first book that are continuing into your second book. You have threads that you begin in your second book that continue into the third, and you have threads that span across the whole trilogy. So for anyone who is in the or thinking about doing it, I would say for me, it helped to have a framework in place of kind of what I wanted to accomplish and how those 3 books were each or they have a different feel. And I think if you there's commonality across all of them, of course, but my goal was at the end of writing this trilogy, the readers would be divided on which was their favorite. And they very much are. There's the people who love Jade City because of its being a very tight, focused clan warfare story. There's those that love the international intrigue of Jade War and those that love the extended family saga of Jade Legacy. So each one kind of had its own purpose, its own goal. And, I think that oftentimes successful sequels, trilogies are reinventing themselves in the process of the telling.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you, audience, for saving me from having to come up with another question. I have a great one here. What most inspires your writing? Life or history or ...
What most inspires? I think like a lot of writers, it's a whole bunch of like random stuff that gets mashed together. So you're pulling things from, it could be things that inspire you. It could be things that have happened to you. It could be things you're interested in researching and creativity. There's this book by Austin Kleon called Steal Like an Artist, which I think is very, very true. That as a creative person, you're building on everything that came before you, and you're plagiarizing, in the best way possible, everything else, and mashing it together and remixing it and making something that's uniquely you. And I think one of the things that inspire me in particular are either personal experiences or things that other media often inspires me. I'm a big movie fan, and I have oftentimes I'm like, oh, I want to write something that gives me the vibe of some piece of media that I really love. And then I've been a martial artist my whole life, so you see a lot of that come through in my books.
Well, speaking of some of your background and how it influences, great question about how are you so good at making up cultural phrases, e.g., the weatherman reads the clouds, or quote, let the gods recognize them, or quote, far may your enemies flee, end quote. Does your business background help here?
I don't know if it's that in particular. I just really love cultural world building. world building junkie. And I like to make the worlds that I create feel as lived in, as kind of texturally rich and real as I can. And that includes all those little cultural details, the way people talk and the phrases they have. And then they just sound cool. I don't know, like I love making up things that sound cool. Like the titles for the different positions in the clan, that was just so much fun, like to try and find the right word that communicates the vibe for a particular position, like the horn. Like the horn is just, I don't know, it just sounds really cool. Like I want to be the horn, like that sounds cool, And so yeah, a lot of it is driven just by like what's the cool factor. I've taught world building classes where you go into like all the like techniques and like how you do it to fully immerse the reader, and all the like things you can comment on in your world building, and the society and power structures and economics and all that. But I often ask the students like, what is the and I use what I call the armored bears theory of literature, which is that and this is from Philip Pullman's his Dark Materials, right? That like that is a trilogy with a lot of hefty themes of religion and dogma, and it also has armored bears, and armored bears are just really freaking cool. So like, what's the thing in your world that's just really cool? And so for me, naming stuff and making and the titles and the names of the luxury cars in my world and stuff, that's cool. It's what makes it fun for me. It makes it feel real.
So it sounds like cool is one of the pillars of your world building, a cool factor, at least one. Are there some other world building pillars that you kind of go back to as you're building a world?
I just wanted, well, in this trilogy in particular, I wanted it to feel like a real place. And could I create a place that was clearly coded East Asian in its nature, but that felt like it had its own history, and that was really built around the speculative element, this magic jade. And so one of the things that I think about a lot when it comes to world building is just making it feel lived in. And that's everything from, some things that like maybe you don't think about that much when you're starting off building your world, things like sports, pop culture, fashion, movies. I had a lot of fun with Jade Legacy because it spans a large amount of time, and it reaches up almost to modern era or current day for us. And so I got to show kind of the change in that society, and things like movies coming out and like fax machines, and I don't know, like just things that make the world feel real, brand names. So making the world feel lived in and the characters feel like a product of their world is really important to me. Not just the world being a backdrop that's cool, but the characters coming fully from that world and interacting with the world, and also having their impact on that world.
Your world building is so layered and dense. You've got the mythology, and then the families, and then the pop culture, and then the cool. You're very much giving us a lot to work with. And with a question about that, so because the Greenbone saga spans so much time and so many political and global developments, how hard was that to integrate? How much was inspired by real world? And how did you explore how did you decide what to explore and what to leave out?
Yeah, the world may be cool, but the world always has to serve the story, not the other way around. So there's a story that I'm trying to tell, and the story revolves around this family. So everything has to be in service of that. And in the Greenbone saga, there are a lot of things that were inspired or drawn from our world, like Cold War geopolitics, the economics of scarce industry. So I ended up doing a whole bunch of research into things like diamond mining, the history of De Beers. There's different ways of mining jade that show up in Jade Legacy as a result of technology change. And so I did a whole bunch of research into like undersea, diamond mining. I did like research into the drug cartels in Mexico, like post World War II geopolitics. So there's a lot of stuff that, and even things like, for example, in Jade Legacy, you see more of how Jade affects the medical industry. And that's largely based on the legalization of acupuncture here in the United States. So I did a whole like dive into how that came to be accepted and mainstream here. So so I usually have a sense of where the story is going and what I want to how I want these characters to grow and develop and where they're leading to. And then I look for like, what is it that serves that heightens that? And then I go and do further research. And then in the research, I will discover cool things, and that might then influence the plot. So it's very iterative. You kind of get inspired by something, and then you write it. In order to write it, you do some research, and then the research inspires you. And sometimes you just have to, you might find something cool and be like, well, that's cool, but it doesn't serve the story at all. And you have to leave it be. You can't give into the temptation to show off all the research you've done, because no one wants to know all about all the research you've done.
Okay,
They
we
want
want to
the
know.
story.
We want to know, what's the cool thing that got left out that you wish you had a spot for? It just didn't quite make it into Green Bone Saga.
Gosh, I don't know. There's been so many things. It's like 7 years of writing.
Something you loved, perhaps, but just never found a way to put it in.
Gosh, that's a good question.
I know, I didn't even come up with it. That was one of you. Good job, team.
Huh. I mean, I had, I thought about, because I was really, there's a subplot in Jade Legacy involving the film industry. And I ended up diving into like triad involvement in the Hong Kong film industry, of which there is a lot. And that was really, that was interesting stuff that I was like, oh, I want to like work this in somehow. And I did to some extent. So it's in there, like it's sort of in the background of some of the major plot points. But I was like, I can't turn this book into like just, an entire novel about the No Peak Clan's like interests in film.
Can't you though? Could you really? I would love to go back there sometime. Maybe a short something.
There, but like, it's not a big enough thing that I could go super in depth on that. But yeah, I ended up doing a lot of looking into like organized crime involvement and entertainment. That definitely worked its way in there, but in like a small way.
Awesome. Okay, I've got 2 questions about action in your novels. And here's where our audience can't see my eyebrows waggling. Action. So one of the parts of your worlds that I really enjoy is how you present action scenes. Any tips, hints, or tricks for writers who want to write action? And the next one is the other kind of action, the romance action. So you want to start with one and go to the other?
I'm actually talking to the Clearing West class tomorrow. We're doing a whole session on fight scenes. So I can't give it all away tonight. There's too many members here.
Students, plug your ears. The rest of us are dying to know.
There's actually, I think, a huge amount of commonality between the craft of writing a good fight scene and the craft of writing a good sex scene. Though I think those are often seen as 2 of the hardest types of scenes to write. And I think that I think they are so similar because they're both about characters having a very physical conversation with each other. So they're both interactions that in which each person involved in that is in a state of like high emotion, right? Like we're generally we try to be peaceable people. The mental and emotional barrier to getting to a point where you are in like physically violent situation with another human being is probably really severe. So I always try to keep in mind that your action scenes, your fight scenes have to matter. You have to build up to them properly. And then you have to really convey the emotional stakes and put as much care into the writing of them as you do any other part. You can't be kind of slapdash about it or make it confusing or rushed or boring. And then it has to have lasting repercussions through the story. Because I think we've all seen those, the movies and where it's like, wow, they're on like their 5th fight scene. I don't even really know what's happening right now. Like you want for me at least, I go for quality over quantity. I think sometimes there's definitely, like, my publisher likes to slap great action scenes like on the, back of my books. And then every once in a while I have readers who are like, I just didn't have as much action as I thought it would be based on the marketing. And it's because, like I don't actually have a ton of action scenes. I just really try to make sure each one of them counts and they all feel unique and different, and whatever happens in those confrontations has lasting implications for the entire rest of the story. And yeah, like the same thing goes with romance and sex scenes, is that I don't pull the curtain, I don't shut the curtain before I write a fight scene. So I don't do that with my romantic scenes either. I just want these characters to feel as real as possible. And to kind of portray them in sort of every element of their lives, the really violent parts, the more domestic parts, which were actually some of my funnest, most enjoyable scenes to write, were kind of the more intimate domestic moments for those characters.
And we've been spending a lot of time talking about Greenbone saga, but we have a question from the YouTubes about some of your earlier work.
Yahoo!
So since we're talking about Zero,
I love being asked about my earlier work.
We love Zero Boxer, and it's a book full of a lot of very good action, I think. So question, how did you get the idea for Zero Boxer, and will there be more in that universe?
Unfortunately, no, there won't be more in the universe. I got the idea for Zero Boxer because I was working in sports marketing at Nike while I was drafting that novel. And I was in a lot of meetings discussing brand strategy, and I'd like go into a room with LeBron James, and like people from my team would be like presenting the new shoe. And it was so I kind of had a front row seat to how sports celebrities are made. And being the science fiction writer that I am, I wanted to tell a story about the pressure of being an athletic prodigy, but set like in the far future, in which this athlete came to represent Earth. And Earth had kind of fallen behind the rest of the solar system in development. And I was thinking about how much emotional weight we put on our athletes to represent our high school, our city, our nation at the Olympics. And I envisioned like a story in which like this one athlete kind of carried the expectations of Earth into an interplanetary sporting event, and also combined that with ideas of like a conspiracy involving genetic engineering and also combat sports, because I'm a martial artist and I liked watching UFC. So that all kind of mashed together. And that's how Zero Boxer came to be. And I just want to point out, like the other day, my husband sent me this article that is from it's from the Wall Street Journal. It's called "Why Sports in Space Could Be the Next Best Thing." So it was talking about sports and zero gravity, and I was like, I am waiting for my book to come true.
So when are we going to option those rights? Can we get that on Netflix? Anybody know anybody at Netflix? So also, it occurs to me that Zero Boxer, correct me if I'm wrong, also, and Greenbone, they're societies that take place after major conflict, like there's been a war. And so you've got like A bit of this.
Girl Boxer isn't, but EXO is.
EXO
Yeah.
is okay. Okay, I'm sorry. So you've got the recovery and this, like the idea of representing the U.S. And athletes and athletics, and what does that look like in the future and in space? Oh, I lost my question. Sorry. I will come back to you. YouTube question. I lost you. Sorry. There was a segue. Let me skip to one that comes back to the audience here. This is a big one. And whoever apologized, I'm not going to apologize for your awesome academic question. Thank you for asking it. There are themes in Greenbone that remind me a lot of Charles Tilly's war making and state making as organized crime. Can you share your thoughts about the relationship or parallels between organized crime and statecraft?
Wow. What do I look like?
From
Someone
sex
who's
scenes
smart?
to statecraft, go.
I'm fascinated by power structures. I think that's a big part of the world building, principles that I always glom onto. Is like every society has its way to maintain order, and there's power is never distributed equally. And like I'm always just fascinated by power structures on kind of like a macro scale, but also like on a micro scale, right, within communities and within families. And there's just something absolutely fascinating about organized crime, and it has something to do, I don't know why, I just like really enjoy watching mafia movies. And I think it is because they operate in a they operate in a social structure that is not constrained by the laws that the rest of us follow, right? And so, but they still are very organized and efficient. And so they have to create their own means of delegation and enforcement that are outside of the state, right? Outside of the legal system. And so there's so much ripe storytelling there because the enforcement of that is something that they don't rely on, the legitimate world for. And so they've created their own, and so there's always themes of betrayal and loyalty and code that they've created themselves. And I wanted to replicate the feel of that in the Greenbone saga, but I didn't want to tell a story in which it was just like gangsters versus cops, because like there's tons of those stories. And I'm a fantasy world builder, and I don't have to pay attention to our real world. I can just make up my own stuff. So I decided, well, I'll create a world in which I can kind of replicate that power structure and like those sorts of very harsh social dynamics, those like really, really oppressive kind of codes of conduct, but also in like on a national scale, that I get to say cool things about like macroeconomics and geopolitics, and like make those people, the de facto government ruling class. So that's the beauty of writing fantasies. Like you can take things that interest you and then put them in a completely different context and see if you can make it work. But I think like one of the things that I wanted to do with the Greenbone saga was depict a different type of social structure and government than what you usually find in epic fantasy. Right? So much of epic fantasy is like this somewhat like halcyon, like this romantic view of monarchy, right? So much of epic fantasy has kings and knights, and it's always somewhat kind of past facing, because so much of fantasy is inspired by historical periods. And by telling a story that was in a modern era, I could play with different social structures and nuances in ways that I think a lot of that might not have if I'd written of a traditional epic fantasy, because I have a nation that was under previous occupation by another nation that now has a constitutional monarchy, but where the monarchy is ceremonial, and there is like a functional democracy, but also this kind of like the shadow government, the way things work behind the formal government. And I think all of our many societies are like that, where there is sort of the outer wrapping of, say, democracy, and then there's what's happening behind that, right? There's like, who's pulling the strings behind that? Like, what's the plutocracy or the oligarchy that's actually behind the outward facing institutions? What's sort of the shadow institutions? So that's, I don't know if that answers the question. That I hope that, I mean, that was a very smart question and I gave the best answer I could.
It was that got it. I think so. Yes. Nods. Great. So combining story elements from different cultures is something that many writers attempt or want to attempt, and they hesitate over concerns of cultural appropriation. And with the Greenbone saga weaves Eastern and Western influences in kind of a very seamless homage. What have you learned and what advice would you give other writers attempting similar?
I think you need to go in with with intention, and to be deliberate about your choices, and just know what your goal is. Because if you, let's say, so in my case, I wrote a story in which I knew I was pulling from a bunch of different cultures, Eastern and Western, and I was creating this secondary world where I wasn't trying to peg it to any specific place or time in our world. So I was using a lot of cues, but I was always careful not to use words like kimono or dim sum, because that would then immediately place it in our world. And that and so you'll see like descriptions of food in the Greenbone saga will immediately make you think Asian food, but they won't be adobo, they won't be sushi, right? And so that was my approach. But I know many other writers who have leaned into a specific place or time period, and like, this is based on ancient Japan, or this is based on the Philippines, but if it was never colonized. And then you have to really, if you're going to do that, then you have to honor the source, you know, and make sure that you are representing all of those elements appropriately and correctly. So you have to go in with sort of with a deliberation around your world building and not be careless about it. So it would have been absolutely jarring if out of the blue I had, you know, suddenly, I don't know, thrown in a geisha, you know, into Greenbone Saga. It would have jarred wrong. It'd be like a discordant note. But if I was writing a historical fantasy set in Japan, it would, you know, it would ring false if I threw in something that was clearly from Korea, you know? So like, you just have to make sure that you're always, you always have kind of the North Star of what you want to do, and make sure that you're doing the due diligence and making all of your world building choices with care. And also, don't be too afraid. I think a lot of people are afraid that they can't, you know, they can't use anything, they can't do anything without having to do like a thesis worth of research. They have to get it absolutely perfect. But like for me, I mean, as a second generation Asian American, like I haven't lived in Asia. You know, for me, Asia growing up was like a fantasy world. I learned about it so much more from the stories of my parents and from media, and than I ever did from personal experience. So I really was drawing, you know, from I had to kind of overcome that fear of like, I don't know enough, you know. But if I let that consume me, then I would never have written the books. So you can't let that fear of like, I don't know enough, I don't know everything, like I'm not knowledgeable enough, I'm not authentic enough to carry this off. You have to overcome that. And you know, you do your best. Is everyone going to like it? No, probably not. You know, so, but you have to like it. You have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I did, you know, I did the best that I could, and then I will leave it to the judgment of the masses.
Got one more for you, and then we'll let you out of the hot seat. Thank you again for being here tonight and sharing all of this with us. And I want to ask this one for the writers in the room who've been carrying a story that it's been one that they really want to write and they kind of aren't sure how it's going to come out, and it's an idea and then maybe they attempt it a few times and it flops. Like, what is it that, and so to tie it in, I've read that Jade City was an idea that you had and you had for a while before you were able to put it down and get it to the way you were ready to write it. So what advice would you give to others about when that idea comes up, like what to do with it, and then when you know it's time to move on it?
Oh gosh. It's hard to know because every writer is so different. Some people really have that, like the spark. Once an idea comes to them, they have to sit down and start writing it. But I'm not that type of writer. I've always been the sort of writer that has an idea and then it percolates and it percolates some more. And then I add another idea to it. And then it sort of sits in a drawer for a while. And then I glom some more onto it. So I always think of, when my ideas show up, I think of them as going into some sort of probationary period where if they fade away of their own volition, well, they weren't good enough anyways. They didn't make the cut. But if like I hang on to the idea and it keeps coming back to me and refuses to go away, then it's probably an idea worth exploring. And I keep an ideas file and I'll write down my ideas. Every once in a while, I'll go back to the ideas file and be like, yeah, that idea was dumb, cross it off. And then others, I'll be like, oh yeah, I still really like that idea. So I hold my ideas in this kind of pen for a while. And I have to be, in the case of this trilogy, I had the idea for a while, but I didn't feel ready to write it yet because it was so ambitious. And I wanted to do it justice. And at that point, also, I had another book contract. So I had to fill that first. And so I had to, I actually wrote part of it, put it in a drawer because I was stuck. And it sat there for several months before I came back to it and looked at it with fresh eyes. And then I was like, okay, now I know where this, I know how to finish it and I see what I have to do. So I guess like, I guess my advice is, it is to be patient with your ideas. And sometimes so I think of them as like a little kernel of sand, and then you never know how it's going to come to you, right? It could be a character, it could be one premise, could be a cool bit of world building. And then they gather material, it's like accretes to become a pearl. And it's hard to, it's hard to rush that process. Sometimes you sort of have to because your editor is like, what are you going to write next? Not that I have personal experience with that.
No, none of us have ever been there. Never. Well, thank you again so much. I'm going to hand it back over to Misha.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Fonda. So we'll have signing happening here and line out through the door. Support University Bookstore, support Clarion West. Thank you so much.
Thank you.